They had $73 between them when they walked into that abandoned palace, not knowing the vault hidden beneath its marble floors held $720 million in cash, gold, and bonds that would rewrite everything they thought they knew about their final years. Before we dive into this story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The desert wind carried dust across Highway 95 like whispers of forgotten dreams. Harlan Tesler gripped the steering wheel of their 1998 Ford Ranger, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of asphalt cutting through Nevada's barren landscape. Beside him, Delphine sat with a road map spread across her lap, one finger tracing the route they'd marked in red ink 3 days ago. 78 and 76 years old respectively, and they were chasing what most people would call a fool's errand. The truck's air conditioning had died somewhere outside of Tonopah, and sweat beaded on Harlan's forehead despite the bandana he'd tied around his head. Delphine kept a small battery-operated fan aimed at her face, her silver hair pulled back in the same neat bun she'd worn for 40 years. They didn't speak much anymore, not because they'd run out of things to say, but because after 54 years of marriage, silence had become its own language. 3 years ago, they'd had a house, a small ranch style in North Platte, Nebraska, with a garden Delphine tended every spring and a garage where Harlan restored old radios. They'd had savings, too. Not a fortune, but enough. $47,000 built up over decades of careful living, penny by penny, sacrifice by sacrifice. Then came a phone call from a man named Richardson. Investment opportunity, he'd said. Guaranteed returns. Harlan, who'd spent 36 years as an insurance adjuster, should have known better. But Richardson had references, paperwork, even came recommended by their bank. 6 months later, Richardson was arrested. The money was gone. All of it. Swept into some offshore account that lawyers said might take years to recover, if ever. Delphine's medical bills from her hip surgery came due. The house went into foreclosure. Their daughter Mavis, a lawyer in Phoenix, had offered help, but the offer came wrapped in judgment, in I-told-you-sos neither of them could stomach. Pride, Harlan knew, was a luxury they couldn't afford. But it was the only thing they had left, so they'd bought a used RV with the last of Harlan's pension payout. $12,000 for a 1987 Winnebago that leaked when it rained and groaned like an old man every time they drove over 15 miles per hour. They'd been living in Desert Wind RV Park for 2 years now, Lot 47, surrounded by other people who'd run out of options and time. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday. Delphine pulled it from the communal mailbox, her hands shaking as she read the return address. Cromwell and Associates Estate Liquidations, Las Vegas, Nevada. Inside was a single page typed on heavy cream paper. It detailed an upcoming estate auction for a property in the desert 30 miles outside Las Vegas. A palace, the letter called it, built in 1987 by tech mogul Thaddeus Crane. 10,000 square feet, 12 bedrooms, indoor pool, tennis courts. Foreclosed after decades of abandonment. Minimum bid, $50,000. Harlan had laughed when she showed him. We got $73 in checking and you're showing me a mansion auction. But Delphine kept reading. At the bottom, a separate paragraph outlined something unusual. Serious bidders may schedule exploratory visits prior to auction date. Refundable deposit of $100 required. Deposit returned if property is not purchased. $100, refundable. We could see inside, Delphine had whispered, her eyes bright for the first time in months. Just to see it. Maybe take some pictures. When else are people like us going to walk through a palace? Harlan wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her they couldn't afford to waste gas money on fantasies. But when he looked at his wife, really looked at her, he saw something he hadn't seen since before they lost everything. Hope. Maybe not hope that they could buy it, Just hoped that they could pretend for an afternoon that their lives hadn't shrunk down to 400 square feet of rotting Winnebago and instant coffee. So he'd called the number. A man named Cordell had answered, voice smooth as river stones. "Of course, Mr. Tesla. We have an opening this Thursday at 2. Bring the deposit in cash and you'll have 2 hours on the property. Will that work?" Now, 3 days later, they were an hour outside Las Vegas, and Harlan's stomach twisted with the kind of anxiety that came from knowing you were about to do something reckless. The $100 sitting in Delphine's purse represented their grocery money for the next 2 weeks. If they didn't get it back, they'd be living on rice and canned beans. 10 more miles, Delphine said, squinting at a road sign half buried in sand. The landscape had shifted from flat desert to rolling dunes studded with Joshua trees. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and hazy. They passed a defunct gas station, its pumps rusted and windows shattered. Then nothing. Just road and heat shimmer and the occasional hawk circling overhead. There, Delphine pointed. A faded sign read, Crane Vista Estates, private property. An unmarked dirt road branched off the highway, disappearing into the hills. Harlan turned, the truck bouncing over ruts and rocks. Dust plumes rose behind them, coating everything in fine beige powder. They drove for another 15 minutes before the palace appeared. Harlan hit the brakes so hard, Delphine had to brace herself against the dashboard. "Lord Almighty," she breathed. It rose from the desert like something from another world. Art Deco architecture painted in shades of cream and gold, now faded and peeling. Massive columns flanked the entrance, and a grand staircase swept up to double doors that had to be 12 feet tall. Fountains lined the circular driveway, empty and cracked, filled with tumbleweeds and sand. Gardens that had once been manicured sprawled wild and dead, skeletal remains of palm trees leaning at odd angles. But it was the size that stole their breath. The building stretched wider than anything Harlan had seen outside of movies. Wings branched off in 3 directions. Balconies jutted from upper floors. Stained glass windows caught the afternoon sun, throwing colored light across the sand. Even abandoned, even dying, it was magnificent. A black sedan sat near the entrance. As they pulled up, a man stepped out. Mid-40s, expensive suit despite the heat, aviator sunglasses. He checked his watch as they approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Tesla," he called out. Harlan climbed from the truck, his lower back protesting. Delphine joined him, smoothing her cotton dress. They must have looked like exactly what they were, 2 old people who didn't belong here. "That's us," Harlan said. "You Cordell?" The man nodded, not offering his hand. "I am. You brought the deposit." Delphine pulled 5 $20 bills from her purse, each one carefully folded. Cordell counted them twice, then produced a receipt from his briefcase. "You've got 2 hours. Starts now. I'll wait out here. Don't touch anything valuable, don't remove anything, and stay out of areas marked unsafe." "We understand," Delphine said quietly. Cordell pulled a keyring from his pocket and unlocked the massive doors. They swung inward with a groan that echoed across the desert. "I should mention," he added, not looking at them, "there have been some strange reports about this property." Harlan frowned. "Strange how?" "Security cameras that shouldn't have power sometimes show activity. Lights seen at night. Probably squatters or wildlife, but people get spooked." Cordell lit a cigarette. "Property's been empty since '93 when Crane disappeared. That's 32 years of stories piling up." "Disappeared?" Delphine asked. "Presumed dead. Never found a body. Made his fortune in early computer chips, went paranoid, built this place, then vanished. Banks have been trying to liquidate ever since, but there's been legal tangles. Finally cleared last month." Cordell checked his watch again. Clocks ticking. They stepped inside. The entrance hall soared 3 stories high, topped with a stained glass dome that painted the marble floor in pools of blue and amber light. A grand staircase, wide enough to drive a car up, curved toward the second floor. Chandeliers hung dark and dusty. Furniture sat covered in white sheets like ghosts of luxury. The air smelled of dust and time and something else, something chemical and cold. Their footsteps echoed as they walked deeper inside. Harlan's hand found Delphine's, fingers intertwining. They moved through rooms that seemed endless. A ballroom with a floor so polished they could still see faint reflections despite decades of neglect. A dining room with a table that could seat 30. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, books still in place, spines faded by sunlight streaming through unwashed windows. "Someone just left all of this," Delphine whispered, like they walked out mid-sentence. She was right. In the kitchen, dishes sat in a sink. In a bedroom, clothes hung in closets. Photographs lined hallway walls, all showing the same man. Tall, thin, intense eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Thaddeus Crane at ribbon cuttings. Thaddeus Crane shaking hands with governors. Thaddeus Crane standing alone in this very palace, the fountains behind him flowing, the gardens green. Harlan checked his watch. They'd been inside 45 minutes. Delphine had wandered toward the east wing, photographing details with a disposable camera she'd brought. He found himself drawn to a study on the second floor. Unlike other rooms, this one's door had been closed. He pushed it open carefully. The study was smaller, more intimate. A massive oak desk dominated the space. Filing cabinets lined one wall. But what caught Harlan's attention was the journal sitting open on the desk, as if someone had just been writing in it. He approached cautiously, half expecting the pages to crumble. But the leather binding was intact, the paper still crisp. He opened to the first page. The handwriting was tight, controlled, slanting right. January 3rd, 1992. They're getting closer. I can feel it. The investors, the lawyers, the vultures circling. They think they own me because they own my company. They don't understand. What I've built here isn't just shelter. It's preservation. When everything collapses, when the system eats itself, this will remain. Harlan flipped forward. The entries grew more paranoid, more frantic. Mentions of security systems, underground construction, securing assets beyond their reach. February 14th, 1993 was the last entry. It's finished. Everything that matters is where only I can find it. Let them take the company. Let them take the patents. What they can never find is worth more than all of it combined. "Harlan?" Delphine's voice carried up the stairs. "You need to see this." He found her in the basement, accessible through a door off the kitchen. The stairs were solid concrete, well built. The basement was vast, stretching the length of the palace. Support beams rose like trees in a concrete forest. Pipes ran overhead. Electrical panels lined the walls. And standing near the far wall, Delphine pointed at something that made Harlan's breath catch. A section of wall that didn't match the rest. The concrete was smoother, newer. The seams were too perfect. And mounted beside it, at waist height, was a panel that looked like it belonged on an airplane cockpit. Buttons, switches, a small display screen dark with age. "Blueprints are over there," Delphine said, gesturing to a framed set of plans mounted near the stairs. "I was comparing them to the actual space. That wall doesn't exist on the blueprint. And look at the measurements. We're missing about 20 feet of space." Harlan moved closer to the wall, running his hand across the surface. It was cold, almost metallic under the concrete facade. He examined the panel. No labels, no instructions. Just 7 buttons arranged in a pattern and a keyhole that looked military-grade. "There's something behind this," he said quietly. "Something he built that's not on any official plan." Delphine checked her watch. "We've got 35 minutes left." Harlan looked at his wife. Really looked at her. In the dim basement light, he could see every year on her face. The lines around her eyes from smiling, then from worrying. The grey in her hair that had once been auburn, the stoop in her shoulders from carrying burdens too heavy for one person. They'd lived such careful lives, followed every rule, paid every bill on time, saved and sacrificed and played it safe. And where had it gotten them? Homeless in their 70s, living in a tin can, rationing meals. "We should tell Cordell," Harlan heard himself say, but his hand was already reaching for the panel. "We should," Delphine agreed, but she moved closer, not further away. The buttons were recessed, requiring deliberate pressure. Harlan traced the pattern, counting. 7 buttons, but the arrangement was deliberate. 3 on top, 3 on bottom, 1 in the center. He thought of the journal upstairs. Thaddeus Crane hadn't been crazy. He'd been meticulous. Everything had a pattern, a logic. "Try all 7 at once," Delphine suggested. "Simultaneous pressure, like a fail-safe." Harlan positioned his fingers. Delphine helped, their hands working together the way they had for 5 decades. They pressed down together. For a moment, nothing. Then a sound, deep and mechanical. A hum that resonated through the floor. Lights flickered on the panel display, numbers scrolling in green phosphorescent glow. And the wall began to move. It slid inward, smooth and silent despite decades without use. Behind it, instead of another room, they saw polished steel. An elevator door. The hum grew louder. Lights came on, fluorescent and bright, illuminating a shaft that descended into darkness. The elevator car rose from below, arriving with barely a whisper. The doors opened. Inside was pristine, stainless steel walls, a control panel with only 3 buttons, up, down, and emergency stop. No dust, no decay. The air that wafted out smelled filtered, climate-controlled. This was active, maintained, impossible. Harlan and Delphine stood frozen. The elevator waited, patient as time. Somewhere above them, Cordell was checking his watch, smoking another cigarette, oblivious. They had maybe 30 minutes before he came looking. "We go down," Delphine said, her voice steady despite the tremor Harlan could see in her hands. "We came all this way. We paid our $100. We've spent our whole lives wondering what if. This might be our last chance to find out." "Delphine, we don't know what's down there." "Exactly." She met his eyes. "And I'm tired of not knowing, tired of being safe and careful and ending up with nothing anyway." She stepped into the elevator. "You coming?" Harlan thought of the journal, the careful plans, the paranoia masking preparation. Thaddeus Crane had hidden something he believed was worth more than his entire fortune, and for 32 years it had waited in darkness while the palace above decayed. He stepped in beside his wife. His finger hovered over the down button. One press, and there was no pretending they'd stayed upstairs, following the rules. One press, and they crossed a line from tourists to trespassers, maybe worse. Delphine's hand covered his. Together, they pressed down. The doors closed with a soft pneumatic hiss. The elevator descended, smooth and fast. Harlan's stomach lurched. 20 feet, 40, 60. His ears popped. The digital counter above the door kept scrolling. 100 feet, 120. They were going deeper than any basement had a right to be, deeper than made sense for a palace in the desert. At 140 feet, the elevator slowed, stopped. The doors opened. Harlan and Delphine stepped out into another world. The corridor stretched before them, easily 12 feet wide and 10 feet tall. The walls were the same polished steel as the elevator. LED lights ran along the ceiling in strips, bright as daylight. The floor was industrial tile, spotless. The temperature was cool, comfortable, and the smell, Harlan realized, was filtered air, recycled and cleaned. "This has power," Delphine whispered. "Active power, after 32 years. They walked forward, their footsteps clicking against tile. The corridor branched in 3 directions. Signs mounted on the walls, laser-etched into steel. Storage, systems, residence, vault. Vault. Harlan's pulse hammered in his ears. They'd stumbled onto something vast, something deliberately hidden. This wasn't a wine cellar or a bomb shelter. This was a facility. Engineered, maintained, secret. They chose the residence corridor first, drawn by the familiar word. It opened into living quarters that looked like they belonged on a space station. A bedroom with a hospital-grade mattress, still made. A bathroom with a shower that had been used recently, water stains on the glass. A small kitchen with a refrigerator that hummed softly. Harlan opened it. Bottled water, protein bars, dried goods, expiration dates from 3 months ago. "Someone was here," Delphine breathed. "Recently." In the bedroom, a closet held clothes. Men's clothes, size large, style outdated but expensive. On the nightstand, reading glasses and a book, The Art of War, bookmarked at page 147. Beside it, a photograph in a simple frame. The same man from the portraits upstairs. Thaddeus Crane, but older, greyer, taken here in this underground room. He looked directly at the camera, his expression unreadable. They moved to the systems corridor. This was the heart of the facility. Generators hummed behind thick glass, industrial-sized battery banks, water filtration systems, air recyclers. Everything top of the line, everything engineered for long-term isolation. A control room sat at the end, filled with monitors. Most were dark, but 3 showed live feeds. One was the palace entrance, where Cordell paced and checked his phone. Another showed the desert highway. The third showed the basement, the open elevator, evidence of their trespass captured in real time. "Harlan," Delphine pointed at a monitor bank on the left. Screens showed different angles of something vast, a room or rooms. She toggled controls until one feed came up clear. Oh my God, the vault. Even through the security camera's fisheye lens, they could see it. A space easily 40 feet by 60 feet, walls lined with steel shelving. And on those shelves, stacks. Stacks of what could only be money, vacuum-sealed in clear containers. Gold bars reflecting light. Wooden crates with stenciled labels. Filing cabinets, their drawers partially open, revealing what looked like documents, bonds. Harlan's legs went weak. He grabbed the console edge. This wasn't someone's petty cash. This was wealth. Real wealth. Hidden wealth. "We need to see it," Delphine said. "Need to know if it's real." They found the vault corridor last. It ended at a massive door, circular like a bank vault, stainless steel 6 inches thick. The locking mechanism was complex, biometric scanner, keypad, wheel. Harlan expected it to be sealed. Impossible. But as they approached, they saw the wheel wasn't fully engaged. The bolts were partially retracted. Someone had left it unsecured. Harlan gripped the wheel. It took all his strength, but it turned. The bolts withdrew with heavy clunks. The door, despite its weight, swung open on perfectly balanced hinges. Cold air washed over them. The vault was climate-controlled, even cooler than the rest, and the cameras hadn't lied. The space was filled with wealth beyond comprehension. Cash in neat bundles, hundreds visible through plastic, thousands of bundles stacked floor to ceiling. Gold bars arranged by weight, each stamped with fineness marks and serial numbers. Bearer bonds in leather portfolios, each worth tens of thousands. Rare coins in sealed cases. Rolled canvases in climate tubes, probably art. Jewelry boxes, small but heavy. Delphine walked to the nearest shelf, pulled out a bundle of cash, hundreds, all in sequential order. She set it down, pulled out another, then another. Her hands shook. Tears streamed down her face. "This is real," she choked. "This is all real." Harlan found a ledger on a center table. Leather-bound recent entries dated within the last 2 years. Itemized lists. 20 million in currency, 15 million in gold, 40 million in bearer bonds, 12 million in rare coins, estimated value. The numbers climbed. Harlan flipped to the final page, squinting at the handwriting. Different from the upstairs journal, shakier, older. Final accounting, March 2025. Total assets secured, 723,400,000. May whoever finds this use it wiser than I did. Delphine appeared at his shoulder. She read the number, lips moving silently. 700, she whispered. 700 million. Harlan's vision blurred. His chest felt tight. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. They were two broke retirees who'd paid $100 to look at a mansion. They weren't treasure hunters. They weren't criminals. They were just tired people trying to make it through their final years with dignity. There's a box, Delphine said, voice strange. She moved to a steel case on the table, small, like a safety deposit box. It wasn't locked. She opened it. Inside, a letter. Cream paper, careful handwriting. Addressed to no one and everyone. To whoever finds this first. She unfolded it. Read aloud, her voice breaking. If you're reading this, then I'm dead. The cancer finally won, or maybe just time. I've been living down here for most of 3 decades, hiding, not from the law, though they'd love to find this. Hiding from what I became. From the machine I built that ate my soul. I made this money legally, mostly. Sold my patents, my company. But I made it by becoming something I hated. Ruthless. Cold. I sacrificed relationships, integrity, peace. For what? For this vault full of things I could never spend, never enjoy. I thought I was securing my future. Instead, I built my tomb. So I'm leaving instructions. Use this better than I did. Help people. Build something good. But know this. Taking this money means inheriting my enemies. The investors I cheated. The partners I betrayed. The government that wants its share. They're still looking. They'll always be looking. And when they find out someone found my vault, they'll come for you. Still, maybe you're brave enough to do what I couldn't. Maybe you can turn blood money into something clean. Or maybe you'll just take what you can and run. Either way, it's yours now. All I ask is you make it mean something. Signed, Thaddeus Crane, April 24, 2025. The letter fluttered from Delphine's hands. 2025. Less than a year ago. Which meant Thaddeus Crane had died recently. Which meant this had been his home, his prison, right up until the end, and no one had known. The palace above decayed while a dying man counted his gold in the dark, alone, haunted by choices he could never undo. Harlan checked his watch. They'd been down here 45 minutes. Cordell would be looking soon. They needed to make a decision. Tell someone. Tell everyone. Or stay silent. Walk away. Pretend they never saw this. But even as he thought it, he knew the truth. You couldn't unsee $700 million. You couldn't unknow that everything you needed to live, to breathe again, to help your family, was stacked on steel shelves 30 feet from where you stood. We take pictures, Delphine said, pulling out the disposable camera. Document everything. The letter, the ledger, the money. Then we go upstairs. Tell Cordell we had a nice tour. Get our deposit back. Her eyes met Harlan's, fierce and determined. And we don't say a word until we figure out what the hell we're going to do. Harlan nodded. They worked fast, photographing everything they could. The vault, the ledgers, the letter, the control room, the security monitors. Evidence that all of this existed. Evidence that they'd found it. Because Delphine was right about one thing. Once they walked away, nothing would ever be the same. You couldn't go back to living in a Winnebago with $73 to your name, knowing that 700 million sat in darkness, waiting. They locked the vault door behind them. Rode the elevator up in silence. The basement looked exactly as they'd left it, except now they knew what was beneath. They closed the false wall, the panel resetting with a click. By the time they emerged upstairs, they had 10 minutes left on their 2 hours. Cordell was on his phone when they stepped outside, squinting against the desert sun. He looked up, annoyed. "You're late." "Sorry," Harlan said. "Lost track of time. Big place." "See anything interesting?" Delphine smiled, the same smile she'd used at church socials and library committee meetings. Sweet, forgettable. Just a lot of empty rooms and dust. Beautiful once, I'm sure. Cordell handed Harlan 5 folded 20s. Your deposit. Auction's next Friday if you're interested in bidding. We'll think about it, Harlan said, knowing they wouldn't sleep until Friday. Wouldn't stop thinking about what they'd found. They climbed into the truck, pulled away slowly, the palace shrinking in the rearview mirror. Neither spoke until they were back on the highway, 20 miles toward Vegas, the sun hanging low and orange. Then Delphine laughed, a sharp, bright sound that could have been joy or terror. We found it, she said. We actually found it. Harlan gripped the wheel tighter. We did. What do we do? I don't know. But that was a lie. He did know. They both did. They were going back, not because they were brave or criminal or desperate, but because Thaddeus Crane's letter was right. This was their chance to mean something, to matter again. Not just to survive their final years, but to live them, to make decisions that rippled outward instead of just absorbing every blow the world threw. They drove into the falling dusk, the desert swallowing them, the secret of 720 million burning between them like a second sun. And somewhere behind them, security cameras recorded their departure, digital eyes that might be watched by someone somewhere who'd been waiting 32 years for the vault to finally be opened. Part 1 of Harlan and Delphine's story had ended. But the real journey, the dangerous one, was just beginning. The Winnebago smelled like instant coffee and sleepless nights. Harlan sat at the fold-down table, the disposable camera between his hands like a grenade. Outside, the desert wind rattled the aluminum siding. Delphine stood at the tiny stove, heating water for tea neither of them would drink. They'd been sitting in silence for 3 hours since returning from the palace, and the weight of what they'd found pressed down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. We have to go back, Delphine finally said, not turning around. Her reflection in the dark window looked older than she had that morning, as if the secret had aged her. We can't just leave it there. Harlan rubbed his eyes. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed them, he saw stacks of vacuum-sealed cash, gold bars gleaming under fluorescent light. That final number in the ledger, 723,400,000. Go back and do what? Load up the truck? Walk out with a few million and hope nobody notices? No, Delphine turned to face him. We go back and we document everything properly. We figure out exactly what we're dealing with. We search for any paperwork that proves Thaddeus meant to abandon it. We make sure we're not stealing. It's in a hidden vault 140 feet underground. That's not abandoned, Delphine. That's hidden. He's dead, she said quietly. His letter said to use it better than he did. That's not hiding it. That's leaving it for whoever had the courage to look. She sat across from him, her hands wrapping around his calloused fingers. We've done everything right our whole lives. We saved. We were careful. We trusted the system. And we lost everything anyway. Maybe this is what right looks like now. Maybe this is what we've earned. Harlan wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways this could go wrong. Arrest, prison, losing what little they had left. But when he looked at his wife, really looked at her, he saw something that stopped him cold. Fire. For the first time since they'd lost the house, since they'd moved into this tin can on wheels, Delphine looked alive. How do we even get back in? He asked, and the question itself was surrender. Delphine pulled a wrinkled business card from her pocket. Cordell's card. We call him. Tell him we're interested but need to take measurements. Maybe bring a contractor to assess foundation work. He said serious bidders could schedule visits. We were serious enough to put down a deposit once. He'll want another $100. Then we pay it, Delphine's jaw set. We skip groceries. We eat rice. We figure it out. She paused. or we spend the rest of our lives wondering what would have happened if we'd been brave enough to try. The next morning, Harlan made the call. Cordell answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with irritation. "Tesla, what can I do for you?" "My wife and we've been talking." Harlan forced steadiness into his voice. "We're interested in the property, but we'd need to bring someone to look at the foundation, maybe take some measurements. Would that be possible?" A long pause. "You're serious about bidding?" "We're exploring options," Harlan said, which wasn't quite a lie. "Another $100 deposit. Same rules. 2 hours. I can do tomorrow at 10. "We'll be there." Cordell hung up without goodbye. Delphine emerged from the bathroom, already dressed, her hair pulled back. "He said yes?" Harlan nodded. "Tomorrow, 10 in the morning." He pulled 5 20s from his wallet, the last of the deposit they'd gotten back. "This is it. If we spend this and don't get it back, we're at negative $27. Delphine took the bills, folded them carefully. "Then we better make it count." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Harlan borrowed a tape measure from the RV park manager, claiming he wanted to build shelves. Delphine bought a small notepad at the dollar store and a disposable flashlight. They packed sandwiches, water bottles, and Harlan's old tool belt. To anyone watching, they looked like an elderly couple on a day trip. Only the tremor in Harlan's hands and the steel in Delphine's eyes betrayed the truth. That night, Harlan lay awake listening to Delphine's breathing. She'd fallen asleep around midnight, exhausted. But he couldn't shut his mind off, kept running scenarios. What if the vault was gone? What if it had been a hallucination brought on by heat and desperation? What if Cordell got suspicious? What if whoever had been maintaining that facility came back while they were down there? What if this was their last real chance at anything resembling a future? At dawn, they drove back into the desert. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if Harlan's stomach wasn't knotted with anxiety. Delphine sat rigid in the passenger seat, the notepad on her lap, pen clicking rhythmically. Click, 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 her tell that she was nervous. "We'll be fine," Harlan said, not believing it. "I know," Delphine replied, not believing him. The palace looked different in morning light, less abandoned, more waiting. The shadows were sharper, the decay more obvious. Cordell's sedan was already there, and the man himself leaned against the hood smoking, his expression sour. He didn't move as they pulled up, just watched them climb out of the truck with something like contempt. "Morning," Harlan tried. Cordell ground out his cigarette. "You brought a contractor?" "Decided to assess it ourselves first," Delphine said smoothly. "No point paying someone if the foundation's completely shot." Cordell's eyes narrowed, but he pulled out the keys. 2 hours, same rules. And Tesla, I'm going to be straight with you. The auction's next week. You're not the only interested party. Some developer out of California's been sniffing around. If you're serious, you better be ready to bid real money." "How much is real money?" Harlan asked. $50,000 minimum, but it'll probably go for 70, maybe 80. Cordell unlocked the front doors. "Clock starts now." They stepped inside. The entrance hall felt different, like it was holding its breath. Cordell stayed outside, lighting another cigarette. As soon as the doors closed, Delphine grabbed Harlan's arm. "We've got 2 hours, less if he gets suspicious." They moved quickly through the palace, not bothering with the upper floors this time. Straight to the kitchen, through the basement door, down the concrete stairs. The basement looked exactly as they'd left it. Same support beams, same electrical panels, same false wall. Harlan approached the panel, his insurance training kicking in. He examined it more carefully now. The buttons were labeled, he realized, but so faintly the labels had worn away to almost nothing. He tilted his head, catching light at an angle. Very faint impressions in the metal. Letters PRESSALL. "Press all," he read aloud. The buttons. You press all 7 simultaneously. Delphine positioned her fingers. On 3, 1, 2, 3. They pressed together. The mechanical hum started immediately, deeper than Harlan remembered. The wall slid inward, revealing the elevator shaft. Lights flickered on, bright and sterile. The elevator rose from below, arriving with barely a sound. The doors opened, waiting. "We have maybe 90 minutes, Delphine said. "Let's make them count." They stepped in. Harlan pressed down. The elevator descended smoothly, the counter scrolling. 20 feet, 40, 60. His ears popped at 80. At 120, Delphine squeezed his hand. At 140, they stopped. The doors opened onto the steel corridor, just as pristine as before. The LED lights hummed softly. They moved faster this time, familiar with the layout. Past the residence corridor, where someone had lived until recently. Past the systems corridor with its generators and filtration, straight to the control room. Harlan went to the monitors while Delphine examined filing cabinets along the wall. The security feeds were still active. Cordell paced outside, checking his phone. The highway camera showed empty road. But when Harlan toggled to the basement feed, his blood went cold. The angle showed the open elevator, the false wall, everything, recorded, time-stamped, stored somewhere. "Delphine," he called out. "The security system, it's recording us." She looked up from a file drawer. "Can you erase it?" Harlan examined the controls. Digital video recorder, commercial grade, but old. 98, maybe 99. He found the storage drive, started scanning. Thousands of clips, most showing nothing. Empty corridors. The occasional view of Thaddeus Crane walking the facility, timestamps from years ago. He found yesterday's footage, them exploring, and today's, them returning. "I can delete files," he said slowly. "But I don't know if there's backup storage somewhere." "Deal with that later." Delphine held up a folder. "Harlan, look at this." The folder was labeled Facility Maintenance. Inside, invoices from a company called Desert Systems Solutions. Monthly charges for power, filtration replacement, security monitoring. The most recent invoice was dated 3 months ago. Payment confirmed. But here was the thing. The payment account was automatic withdrawal from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, and the invoices were addressed not to Thaddeus Crane, but to Facility Manager Crane Sublevel. "Someone's been paying to keep this place running," Delphine said, "for 32 years, automatically." Harlan flipped through more papers. Bank statements showing regular withdrawals, just enough to cover utilities and maintenance, maybe $5,000 a month. Over 3 decades, that was nearly $2 million just in upkeep. Which meant Thaddeus had planned this, set up automated systems to keep the vault viable long after his death. He wanted someone to find it eventually, Harlan breathed. That's why he left the vault unlocked, why he wrote that letter. He was dying, and he wanted someone, anyone, to inherit this. "Then we're not stealing," Delphine's voice was fierce. "We're claiming what was meant to be found." They moved to the vault corridor. The massive door waited, its wheels still partially disengaged. Harlan gripped the cold metal, turned, felt the bolts withdraw. The door swung open. Cold air washed over them. And there it was. 700 million in silence and shadow. Delphine walked in first, her steps slow and reverent. She approached the nearest shelf, ran her fingers across the plastic-wrapped bundles of cash. Hundreds, all sequential. She moved to the gold bars, each one heavy as a brick, stamped with fineness marks, 999.9, pure. Beside them, wooden crates stenciled with dates, 1987, 1991. Harlan opened one carefully. Bearer bonds, each worth $50,000. Hundreds of them. "This isn't just money," Delphine whispered. "This is a fortune, a real fortune." Harlan moved to the center table where the ledger sat. He opened it, scanning entries. Thaddeus had catalogued everything meticulously, each gold bar numbered, each bond recorded, the cash counted and sealed. At the very back of the ledger, loose papers, legal documents, trusts, offshore accounts, patents, and one sheet that made Harlan's hands shake. Last Will and Testament of Thaddeus Marcus Crane, dated April 24, 2025, signed and notarized. Being of sound mind, I hereby bequeath all assets contained within the Crane Sublevel facility to the first individual or individuals who successfully access the primary vault. This includes all currency, precious metals, bonds, artwork, and associated documentation. I make this bequest free and clear of all claims, debts, or encumbrances, as restitution for a life misspent, and in hope that good people will do what I could not. He left a will, Harlan's voice cracked. He legally left it to whoever found it. Delphine read over his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. It's ours. Legally ours. But even as relief flooded through him, Harlan saw the other papers, letters, printed emails, all recent, within the last year. His stomach dropped as he read. Crane Vault location suspected. Satellite thermal imaging shows underground power consumption. Recommend immediate recovery. Another. Investors demand asset recovery. Authorization granted for covert surveillance. Another. Subject Crane confirmed deceased, April 26, 2025. Estate in probate. Window closing for unsanctioned recovery. Someone knew. Maybe not exactly where, but they knew Thaddeus had hidden assets. And they were looking. What happens next will turn this inheritance upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest victories carry the most danger. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Harlan, Delphine's voice was tight. We need to take some of this, now, as proof, as insurance. He wanted to argue, wanted to say they should document everything first, be methodical. But she was right. If they walked away empty-handed and someone else found the vault, they'd have nothing, no proof, no claim. He grabbed a small duffel bag sitting in the corner, probably left by Thaddeus, started loading it with essentials, the will, the letter, the ledger. A bundle of hundreds, a single gold bar, heavy as sin. The invoices showing automated maintenance. Delphine grabbed one of the bearer bonds. These are untraceable, anonymous. If everything goes wrong, this is enough to hire lawyers. They worked quickly, methodically, took photographs with the disposable camera, flash popping in the cold vault air, documented the layout, the inventory, the sheer scale. 20 minutes passed. 30. Harlan checked his watch. They had 40 minutes before Cordell would come looking. We need to check the residence again, Delphine said. See if Thaddeus left anything else. Personal papers, proof of his intent. They locked the vault, the bolts engaging with heavy thunks, moved back to the residence corridor. The bedroom, still pristine, felt less creepy now and more sad. A dying man's final home, underground, alone. Delphine searched the closet while Harlan checked the desk in the small office area. Inside the desk drawer, he found more journals. Not the paranoid ramblings from upstairs, but something else. Reflections. Dated entries from the last 5 years of Thaddeus's life. Harlan opened to a random page. September 3rd, 2022. The cancer is in my lungs now. Doctor says maybe 6 months. I could seek treatment, but what's the point? I've been dead for 30 years, just kept breathing. Down here in my tomb, counting gold like a dragon. I thought I was preserving wealth. Really, I was just too afraid to give it away, too proud to admit I was wrong about everything. Another entry, December 12, 2024. Set up the will today. Notary thought I was crazy, old man in a Las Vegas strip mall signing away a fortune to nobody. But that's the point. Give it to somebody. Anybody. Whoever's brave enough to look for it deserves it more than the vultures circling up top. Final entry, April 20th, 2025. Can barely write now. Hands shake, breathing's hard, but it's done. The vault's unlocked, the will's sealed, the letters written. My last act, turning blood money into a gift. Whoever finds this, I hope you're ordinary. I hope you've struggled. I hope you know what it's like to have nothing, because then you'll know what this really means. And maybe, just maybe, you'll do better than I did. Harlan closed the journal, throat tight. He wanted us, he said hoarsely. Not some developer or investor. He wanted ordinary people to find this. Delphine emerged from the closet holding a shoebox. Inside, photographs. Thaddeus as a young man, maybe 30, surrounded by people, colleagues, friends, smiling. Another photo, same people 10 years later. Thaddeus standing apart, his expression harder. Another 10 years. Thaddeus alone in the palace, the gardens dead behind him. The final photo, taken with what looked like a timer, showed Thaddeus in the underground bedroom, gaunt, sick, his eyes hollow, on the back, shaky handwriting, the richest man in the cemetery. "We need to go," Harlan said, checking his watch. 30 minutes left. They loaded everything into the duffel. Journals, photos, the will, the letter, the cash, the gold bar, the bearer bond, evidence, proof, insurance, headed back to the elevator. As the doors closed and they ascended, Harlan felt the weight of what they were doing settle over him like a physical thing. They were taking 700 million in assets that had been hidden from the world for 3 decades. Legally theirs, maybe, according to a will that might not hold up in court, but morally? The elevator stopped at the basement level. The doors opened. They stepped out, moved to close the false wall. Harlan pressed the panel again. The wall slid shut with a soft pneumatic sound, sealing the entrance. To anyone else, it looked like solid concrete, just another basement wall. They climbed the stairs to the kitchen, emerged into the palace proper. Harlan's watch showed 7 minutes until Cordell would start wondering. They walked through the rooms, pretending to measure, Delphine calling out fake dimensions while Harlan scribbled in the notepad, playing the part. They were in the entrance hall when Harlan heard it, a sound that didn't belong. An engine, not Cordell's sedan. Something heavier. He moved to the window, peered through dusty glass. A black SUV was pulling up the driveway, followed by another. Expensive vehicles, dark-tinted windows. They parked beside Cordell's car. 2 men emerged from the first SUV. Suits, despite the heat. Late 30s, early 40s. Hard faces. The kind of men who weren't afraid of getting their hands dirty. Cordell approached them, hands spread in a placating gesture. Harlan couldn't hear the conversation, but he could read body language. Cordell was uncomfortable, defensive. The men weren't asking. They were telling. "Delphine," Harlan hissed. "We've got company." She joined him at the window, watched as one of the men pulled out a document, showed it to Cordell, some kind of authorization. Cordell shook his head, pointed at his watch. The man got closer, said something low. Cordell's shoulders sagged. He handed over the keys. "They're coming in," Delphine breathed. "We need to hide." "No," Harlan grabbed the duffel. "We walk out, right now, like we have every right to be here." "Harlan, we paid for access. We're on the visitor log. If we hide, we look guilty." He straightened, adopted the posture of a man with nothing to fear. "We're just an old couple looking at a house, that's all." They walked to the front door, pushed it open, stepped into harsh desert sunlight. The 2 men turned, assessing them. Up close, they looked even more dangerous. One had a scar running through his eyebrow. The other wore a watch that cost more than Harlan's truck. "Help you?" Harlan asked, voice steady. The scarred one spoke. "You the Teslas?" "That's us. I'm Reeves. This is Sullivan. We represent a recovery firm working on behalf of creditors for the Crane estate." He showed a badge that looked official, but wasn't quite. "We need to conduct an inspection of the property." "Fine by us," Harlan said. "We were just finishing up. Cordell, we'll be going now." Cordell looked relieved. Yeah, sure. I'll get your deposit. Keep it, Harlan interrupted. Consider it a donation. We've decided this place isn't for us. Reeves stepped closer. You toured the whole property? Most of it, Delphine said, her voice sugary and slightly confused, playing the elderly card. Lots of stairs, hard on the knees. See anything unusual? Sullivan asked. Hidden rooms? Safes? Anything like that? Harlan laughed, a dry, tired sound. Unusual? It's a palace in the middle of the desert. It's all unusual. But no, nothing like that. Just a bunch of empty rooms and broken dreams. Reeves studied them for a long moment. Harlan felt the weight of the duffel on his shoulder, felt certain they could see through the canvas to the gold bar, the cash, the incriminating evidence. But he kept his expression bland, slightly bored, just an old man ready to go home. All right, Reeves finally said. Enjoy your day. They walked to the truck, moving slowly, casually. Harlan tossed the duffel in the back seat like it weighed nothing, like it was just tools and water bottles. Climbed in, started the engine. It coughed, sputtered, finally caught. Delphine buckled her seatbelt with shaking hands. They drove down the driveway at a reasonable speed. Harlan forced himself not to check the rear-view mirror, not to speed up. Just a normal drive, normal day, nothing to see. Only when they turned onto the highway, when the palace disappeared behind hills and Joshua trees, did he let out the breath he'd been holding. They're looking for it, Delphine said. Those men. They know the vault exists. They suspect, Harlan corrected. If they knew, they'd have found it already. How long do we have? I don't know. Harlan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. A week? A day? Depends on how thorough they are. He paused. We need help. Real help. Delphine was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, Mavis, their daughter. The lawyer in Phoenix. The one they'd been too proud to call after losing everything. The one who'd offered help wrapped in judgment. Harlan's jaw clenched. She'll say we're crazy. Probably, Delphine agreed. But she's also the only person we know who might understand the legal side of this. She pulled out her phone, old and cracked. We've been stubborn long enough. Pride is what cost us our house. Maybe it's time to try humility. Harlan wanted to argue, wanted to say they could figure this out themselves. Two smart people who'd navigated 70-plus years of life. But the truth was, they were in over their heads, way over. This wasn't changing oil or cataloging books. This was $700 million in hidden assets, mysterious will, and dangerous men in suits who asked uncomfortable questions. Okay, he said finally. Call her. Delphine dialed. The phone rang twice, 3 times. Then a voice, familiar but distant. Mom? Hi, honey, Delphine said, and her voice cracked on the words. I know it's been a while. I know we said we didn't need help, but I think maybe we were wrong. She paused. Can we talk? In person? It's important. She looked at Harlan, at the duffel in the back seat, at the desert blurring past. It's complicated. Whatever Mavis said made Delphine close her eyes. A tear ran down her weathered cheek. Thank you, she whispered. We'll be there by evening. She hung up, stared at the phone. She's making dinner, said she's been waiting for us to call. They drove in silence for a while. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a blast furnace. The air conditioning in the truck barely worked, so they opened windows, let hot wind tear through. Harlan's mind raced. They had maybe a week before the auction, maybe less before Reeves and Sullivan found the false wall, maybe hours before Cordell noticed something off. But they had proof now, documents, photos, a will. They had a claim, tenuous as it was, and they had each other, something Thaddeus Crane had died without. Partners in the most unlikely crime, or maybe the most justified inheritance. Harlan wasn't sure which. What do we tell her? He asked. Mavis, how do we explain this? Delphine considered. The truth, she said finally. All of it. We tell her we found a palace with a vault. We tell her about the will. We tell her we think it's legally ours, but dangerous people want it. We tell her we need help. She looked at him. And we tell her we're sorry, for being too proud, for pushing her away, for letting money come between us. Harlan's throat tightened. What if she doesn't believe us? Then we show her. Delphine pulled the gold bar from the duffel, heavy and gleaming. Kind of hard to argue with this. Phoenix rose from the desert like a mirage. Glass towers catching late afternoon sun, sprawling suburbs climbing into foothills. They found Mavis's address in a neighborhood of modest homes, desert landscaping, and basketball hoops in driveways. Her house was cream stucco with blue trim, a small garden of cacti and succulents out front. Harlan parked. They sat for a moment, gathering courage. Finally, Delphine opened her door. Come on, we've faced worse today. Mavis opened the door before they could knock. She was 46, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. Her hair was pulled back in a professional ponytail, but she wore jeans and a t-shirt. Casual. Home. She looked at them for a long moment, taking in their worn clothes, their tired faces, their desperate hope. Then she hugged them, fierce and tight and without words. Harlan felt something in his chest break open, some dam he'd been holding for 3 years. He hugged his daughter back, and Delphine wrapped her arms around both of them, and they stood there in the doorway crying like children while the desert sun painted everything gold. Come in, Mavis finally said, wiping her eyes. You look like you've had one hell of a day. You have no idea, Delphine said. They sat in Mavis's living room, comfortable furniture and family photos on the walls. Mavis brought water, coffee, sat across from them. Okay, she said, lawyer mode settling over her. What's going on? You sounded scared on the phone. Harlan and Delphine looked at each other. Then Harlan reached down, pulled the duffel onto his lap, unzipped it slowly. We need your legal advice, he said, and probably your complete discretion. He pulled out the gold bar, set it on the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thunk. Mavis stared. What the hell is that? 1 ounce gold bar, Delphine said, worth about $2,000. And we have about 600 more where this came from, plus 700 million in cash, bearer bonds and artwork. The color drained from Mavis's face. I'm sorry, what? We found it, Harlan said simply, in a hidden vault, under a palace, in the desert, and we think it's legally ours. But we need you to tell us if we're right, or if we're about to go to prison. Mavis opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Start from the beginning, she finally managed, and don't leave anything out. So they did. The whole story. The letter about the auction, the $100 deposit, the palace exploration, the hidden panel, the elevator, the sublevel, the vault, the will, Thaddeus Crane's letter and journals, the maintenance invoices, the men in suits who showed up asking questions, all of it. By the time they finished, Mavis had gone through shock to disbelief, to what looked like cautious excitement. She held the will in her hands, reading it for the 3rd time. This is notarized, dated less than a year ago, and it specifically bequeaths all assets to whoever accesses the vault. She looked up. That's actually pretty solid legally. Weird as hell, but solid. So we're not stealing? Delphine asked. No, Mavis said slowly. But you're also sitting on something that a lot of dangerous people are going to want. The state will want taxes. Creditors will challenge the will. And these recovery guys you mentioned, they're not going to just walk away. She set the will down. You need a plan, a real one, and you need it fast. That's why we're here, Harlan said. Help us figure this out, please. Mavis looked at her parents, really looked at them. Saw the grease under her father's nails from a lifetime of fixing things. Saw her mother's hands, still graceful despite age and hardship. saw two people who'd lost everything and somehow found the courage to gamble one last time. Saw love and desperation and hope all tangled together. "Okay," she said, "here's what we're going to do." Mavis spread papers across her dining room table like a general planning a campaign. The will, the letter, the photographs, the maintenance invoices. The gold bar sat in the center, catching lamplight, impossible to ignore. She'd changed into business clothes, pulled her hair back tighter, and the transformation from daughter to lawyer was complete. "First thing you need to understand," she said, tapping the will with her pen, "is that this is going to get ugly, really ugly. We're talking state tax authorities, federal investigators, potential creditors, and whoever these recovery people are. They'll all come at you from different angles." Harlan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "So what do we do?" "We go public," Mavis said. "Immediately, before anyone else can claim they found it first or that you stole it. We document everything, create a paper trail so clear that it's impossible for the money to quietly disappear." She pulled out her laptop. "I'm talking media, lawyers, notaries. We make this the most transparent discovery in history." Delphine's hands trembled around her coffee mug. "Won't that just paint a target on our backs?" "The target's already there, Mum," Mavis said gently. "Those men at the palace, they're not going to forget you. The question is whether you want to face them in the shadows or in the spotlight. Shadows are where people disappear. Spotlight is where they have to play by rules." "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" Harlan asked. Mavis checked her watch. "It's 7 now. By tomorrow morning I want this story everywhere. Local news, papers, even social media. Elderly couple discovers hidden fortune, complete with photos, documents, everything. We establish your claim before anyone can challenge it." She paused. "But first, we need to secure the evidence. That vault, those documents, all of it. We go back tonight." "Tonight?" Delphine's voice cracked. "Those recovery guys will be back at the palace first thing tomorrow, maybe sooner. If they find the vault before we've gone public, they'll clean it out and you'll have nothing but a story nobody believes." Mavis stood. "So we go now. We document everything properly. We take enough evidence that even if they empty the vault, we can prove it existed." Harlan thought of Reeves and Sullivan, their hard faces and dangerous eyes. Thought of the black SUVs, the way they'd studied him and Delphine. What if they're already there? "Then we call the police," Mavis said simply. "You have every right to be there. You paid for access. You're documented visitors. They're the ones trespassing." She grabbed her phone. "I'm calling a notary I trust, someone who can witness and document everything. And I'm calling my investigator friend, Raymond. Former cop, knows how to handle himself." "Mavis," Delphine stood, moved to her daughter. "This could be dangerous. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Mavis cut her off, and her eyes were fierce. "You're my parents. You came to me for help, and maybe I haven't been there enough since you lost the house. Maybe I let pride and anger get in the way." Her voice softened. "But I'm here now, and we're going to do this right." An hour later, they were back on Highway 95, this time in Mavis's sensible Honda sedan. Raymond sat in the passenger seat, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with graying temples and calm eyes. The notary, a woman named Teresa with horn-rimmed glasses and a leather satchel, sat between Harlan and Delphine in the back. They'd explained everything during the drive, and Teresa's expression had gone from skeptical to stunned. "I've notarized a lot of strange documents," she said, "but this might top the list." "Strange doesn't mean illegitimate," Mavis replied from the driver's seat. "That's what we're proving tonight." They reached the turnoff to the palace just after 9. The desert was black under a sliver moon, stars scattered like broken glass. Mavis killed the headlights as they approached, driving the last half-mile on parking lights alone. The palace emerged from darkness, a hulking shadow against darker sky. No vehicles, no lights, abandoned. "Could be a good sign," Raymond said, "or they're inside already." They parked behind a cluster of dead palm trees, out of sight from the road. Raymond pulled a flashlight from his jacket, checked the beam. "I'll go first. Clear the entrance. If it's empty, I'll signal." He moved like someone who'd done this before, low and careful, keeping to shadows. Disappeared into the palace through a side door. Minutes crawled past. Then his flashlight blinked 3 times from an upper window. All clear. They entered through the same side door, Teresa clutching her satchel like a shield. Inside, the palace felt different at night, larger somehow. Their flashlight beams cut through darkness, illuminating fragments. A chandelier, a covered sofa, eyes in a portrait that seemed to follow them. "Basement," Mavis whispered. "Let's move." Down the familiar path, through the kitchen, down concrete stairs, into the basement proper. Harlan approached the false wall, hands shaking, placed his fingers on the 7 buttons. Delphine helped, their coordination automatic after 5 decades, pressed together. The hum started, the wall slid inward. The elevator rose, pristine and waiting. Teresa gasped. "My God, it's real!" "All of it's real," Delphine said. "You're about to see just how real." They crowded into the elevator. Raymond pressed down. The descent felt longer in darkness, more ominous. 100 feet, 120, 140. The doors opened onto the steel corridor, lead strips blazing to life. Teresa stepped out, her professional composure cracking. "This is military-grade construction. This is millions in infrastructure alone." "Wait until you see the vault," Harlan said. They moved through the corridors. Raymond cleared each section, checking corners, making sure they were alone. The residence corridor with its eerie lived-in feeling. The systems room with humming generators. The control room where security feeds showed the palace above, dark and empty. And finally, the vault corridor. The massive door waited. Harlan gripped the wheel, turned, felt bolts withdraw. The door swung open. Cold air rushed out, and there, under harsh fluorescent light, sat 700 million reasons to believe in second chances. Teresa's legs buckled. Raymond caught her elbow. "Steady now." "That's—" Teresa's voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible." "That's Providence," Delphine said quietly. Mavis was already moving, pulling out her phone, photographing everything. "Teresa, I need you to document every item. Photos, written descriptions, your notary seal on the inventory. Raymond, help me catalogue. Mum, Dad, start pulling documents. Anything that proves chain of custody, Thaddeus's intent, the automated maintenance, all of it." They worked for 2 hours, methodical, thorough. Teresa's hand cramped from writing, but she didn't stop. Inventory of cash, approximately 400 million in various denominations, vacuum-sealed. Inventory of gold, 7,000 ounces, various bar sizes. Inventory of bearer bonds, 163 bonds, total face value 40 million. Inventory of artwork, 12 rolled canvases, artists unknown pending authentication. Rare coins, jewelry, antique documents. The list grew and grew. Harlan found more journals in a filing cabinet, entries spanning decades. Thaddeus's descent from ambitious entrepreneur to paranoid recluse to dying man seeking redemption. He found the original construction documents for the sublevel. 1986. Cost, 12 million. Contractor, Desert Vault Systems Incorporated, dissolved 1995. He found evidence of shell companies, offshore accounts, automated payment systems. A paper trail showing how one man had hidden a fortune so thoroughly that it took 32 years and blind luck to uncover it. Delphine discovered something else. A small lockbox in the back of the vault. Inside, personal letters, addressed to family members Thaddeus had alienated. A son who'd stopped speaking to him in 89. A daughter who'd tried to visit once in 91 and been turned away. Parents who'd died thinking their son had wasted his life. The letters were confessions, apologies, explanations. All unsent. All too late. "He died alone down here," Delphine said, holding the letters. "Surrounded by everything and connected to nothing. By midnight, they had documentation that would take days to fully process. Photographs, notarized statements, physical samples. Mavis loaded it all into her car, multiple copies, redundancy in case something happened. They stood in the vault one last time, breathing cold, filtered air, staring at wealth that could change everything. "We leave it locked?" Raymond asked. "No," Mavis said. "We take what we can carry, key pieces. The rest stays for now, but photographed and documented so thoroughly that if anyone moves even one gold bar, we'll know." They filled duffel bags, 50,000 in cash, 10 gold bars, a handful of bearer bonds, the wills, the letters, the journals, evidence and insurance. Not enough to disappear with, but enough to prove the story. Enough to matter. The elevator ride up felt final, like crossing a threshold they couldn't uncross. In the basement, Harlan sealed the false wall one last time. The panel beeped, lights dimmed. The wall slid into place, looking like nothing more than concrete. Their secret, for a little longer. They emerged into desert night, air cool and clean after hours underground. Loaded the car quickly, quietly. Raymond checked the perimeter one more time while Mavis started the engine. They were pulling out when headlights appeared on the access road, 2 vehicles, coming fast. "Down!" Raymond hissed. They ducked as the vehicles passed. Black SUVs. Harlan caught a glimpse through tinted windows. Reeves and Sullivan. And this time they'd brought more people. 4 men total. The SUVs skidded to a stop in front of the palace, doors opening before they'd fully stopped. "Go," Raymond said. "Now!" Mavis hit the gas. They tore down the dirt road in darkness, no headlights, bouncing over ruts. Behind them, flashlights swept the palace entrance. Shouts carried on night wind. Someone had noticed the fresh tire tracks. "They're coming," Delphine said, looking back. Mavis floored it, the Honda's engine screaming. Hit the highway doing 60, lights finally on. Roared toward Vegas, toward safety, toward whatever came next. In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared. Gaining. "How fast can this thing go?" Raymond asked. "We're about to find out," Mavis said. They flew through darkness, speedometer climbing, 70, 80, 90. The SUVs kept pace, professional drivers who did this for a living. But Mavis knew these roads, had driven them 1,000 times. She took a sudden exit, killed the lights, pulled behind an abandoned way station. Killed the engine. They sat in darkness, breathing hard. The SUVs roared past on the highway, not slowing, kept going toward Vegas, searching. "They don't know we were there," Raymond said. "They're guessing, following hunches." "How long before they figure it out?" Harlan asked. "Hours, maybe." Mavis started the engine again. "Which is why we're going straight to the news station, right now. We go public before sunrise." They reached Las Vegas at 2 in the morning. The city blazed with neon and noise, tourists stumbling between casinos. Mavis drove to the local news station, a squat building near downtown, banged on the door marked staff entrance until a security guard opened it. "We need to speak to your night editor," Mavis said. "We have a story, a big one." "Lady, it's 2 in the morning." Mavis pulled out a gold bar, held it up. "Biggest discovery in Nevada history, hidden vault, 700 million, and we have proof." The guard's eyes went wide. He grabbed his radio. "Get Jennifer down here, now." Jennifer, the night news director, arrived in sweatpants and a University of Nevada hoodie, clearly roused from whatever passed for sleep in her profession. She looked at the gold bar, at the elderly couple covered in concrete dust, at the lawyer and the ex-cop, and said simply, "Conference room, start talking." They spread everything across the table. Photos of the vault, the will, the letter, the notarized inventory, the journals, the maintenance records. Jennifer's eyes grew wider with each piece. She called in her lead investigative reporter, a shark-eyed man named Marcus. They questioned Harlan and Delphine for an hour, probing for inconsistencies, checking facts. "This is legitimate," Jennifer finally said. "This is Pulitzer-level legitimate." "It needs to air this morning," Mavis pressed. People are looking for this vault. Dangerous people. If we don't establish my parents' claim publicly, they'll disappear. The money, the evidence, maybe my parents too. Jennifer made a decision. We go live at 6 with breaking news. Marcus, you've got 4 hours to put together the story of your career. Get a crew to the palace at first light. Get footage of everything. She turned to Harlan and Delphine. You two, makeup and wardrobe. You're going on camera. On camera? Delphine's voice squeaked. National news will pick this up by noon, Jennifer said. By tonight, your faces will be everywhere. Might as well control the narrative from the start. At 6:03 in the morning, as the sun crept above the desert mountains, Las Vegas woke to the impossible. The lead story on every local channel. Elderly couple discovers hidden fortune. Harlan and Delphine's faces filled screens across the city. Their story, told simply and honestly, captivated everyone who heard it. The vault, the will, the dying man's redemption, and the estimate that made jaws drop. $720 million. By 7, it was trending nationwide. By 8, the phone at Mavis's office wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, state tax authorities, federal investigators, and something else. Threats. Messages warning Harlan and Delphine to stay away from the palace, to forget what they'd found. Unsigned, untraceable, terrifying. By 9, Reeves and Sullivan showed up at Mavis's office building. Didn't get past the lobby. Security called up. 2 men here to see the Teslas. They're not taking no for an answer. Send them up, Mavis said. She'd been waiting for this. Reeves and Sullivan entered the conference room where Mavis had set up a command center. Harlan and Delphine sat flanked by Raymond and Teresa. Mavis stood, arms crossed. A video camera on a tripod recorded everything. Counselor, Reeves said, his scar pulling as he frowned. We need to talk. So talk, Mavis gestured to chairs. This is all being recorded, by the way, for transparency. Sullivan remained standing. Your clients accessed a secured facility without authorization. They removed property that belongs to our clients. Your clients being? Mavis asked. Crane Industries Investors Group, creditors who were defrauded by Thaddeus Crane in the 80s and 90s. They have legal claim to any recovered assets. Show me the paperwork, Mavis said. Reeves pulled out a folder. Court documents from 1994. Judgments against Thaddeus Crane for breach of contract. Millions owed, still unpaid at the time of his presumed death. Interesting, Mavis said. Now look at this. She slid across the will, dated 2025, specifically bequeathing all sublevel assets to whoever accessed the vault, supersedes all prior claims. That will won't hold up, Sullivan said. Crane was mentally incompetent, dying. This is undue influence or fraud. Prove it, Mavis said coolly. My parents have testimony, notarized documentation and video evidence. They found a vault that Crane deliberately left accessible. They followed his written instructions. Legally, it's theirs. Legally is one thing. Reeves leaned forward and his voice dropped to something dangerous. Practically is another. You're in over your heads. There are people who've spent decades looking for Crane's money. People who don't care about wills or courts. People who just want what they're owed. Is that a threat? Raymond stood, his bulk suddenly intimidating. It's reality, Sullivan said. We're offering a deal. Give us 70%. Keep 30% for yourselves. That's still over $200 million. Enough to live like kings. We file paperwork saying the vault was jointly discovered. We split it. Everyone goes home happy. And if we refuse? Harlan asked, speaking for the first time. Reeves smiled. It wasn't pleasant. Then this gets complicated. For everyone. Mavis moved to the door, opened it. This meeting is over. My clients are not interested in your deal. If you have legal claims, file them in court. If you have threats, we're recording those too and we'll submit them to authorities. Now get out. Reeves and Sullivan stood slowly. At the door, Reeves turned back. You're making a mistake. The Teslas aren't equipped for what's coming. Neither are you. "We'll manage," Mavis said, and closed the door. The moment they left, Delphine started shaking. Oh God, what have we done?" "You stood your ground," Raymond said. "Those men are used to people folding. You didn't." "But what if they come after us?" Harlan asked. "What if—" His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Hello?" "Mr. Tesla, this is Agent Frank Morrison, FBI White Collar Crime Division. We've been monitoring offshore accounts connected to Thaddeus Crane for 15 years. Your discovery this morning is of significant interest to us. I need to schedule a meeting, today if possible." Harlan looked at Mavis, mouthed FBI. She nodded. "We can meet," Harlan said. "Our lawyer will be present." "Of course," Morrison said. 2:00, Federal Building. And, Mr. Tesla, until then, stay somewhere public. Stay visible. There are people who would prefer this discovery stayed buried." The call ended. Harlan set down his phone, hand trembling. "The FBI wants to talk. Said to stay public, stay visible." "Good advice," Teresa said. "You need protection, official protection." Mavis was already dialing. "I'm calling the police, requesting protective detail. This is now officially a high-value theft investigation, except you're the victims, not the perpetrators." By noon, 2 police cruisers sat outside Mavis's building. Officers had taken statements. The FBI meeting was scheduled, and the story had exploded nationally. Elderly couple's $700 million discovery. Networks from New York to LA were calling. Good Morning America wanted them tomorrow. The Today Show offered a 6-figure appearance fee just for an exclusive interview. But with the attention came scrutiny. By 1:00, State of Nevada tax authorities had issued a statement. All assets discovered on Nevada soil are subject to state treasure trove laws and taxation. Estimated state claim, 40%. By 1:15, the IRS had filed notice of interest. Federal tax claim on found money, estimated 35% of remaining. By 1:30, a dozen alleged creditors had filed emergency motions in federal court claiming Thaddeus Crane owed them money and all recovered assets should go toward satisfaction of debt. Harlan watched it unfold on television, saw lawyers who'd never met him arguing about his discovery, saw politicians weighing in, saw talking heads debating whether he deserved any of it. The story had taken on a life of its own, and he and Delphine were just caught in the current. "This is insane," he said to no one in particular. "This is $700 million, Mavis replied. "Did you think it would be simple?" The FBI meeting was held in a sterile conference room with recording equipment and serious men in suits. Agent Morrison was 50s, grey-suited, with eyes that missed nothing. His partner, Agent Chen, took notes. They listened to the whole story again, examined the documents, verified the notarized inventory. "The money itself isn't necessarily illegal," Morrison said carefully. "Crane made his fortune legitimately. But the way he hid it, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, that suggests he was avoiding something. Taxes, creditors, legal judgments. Our concern is that accepting this money might implicate you in his evasion." "We didn't help him hide it," Delphine said. "We found it 32 years later." "True," Chen said. "But possession of funds connected to financial crimes can still be problematic. We're not saying you're guilty of anything. We're saying this is complicated." "What do you recommend?" Mavis asked. "Transparency," Morrison said, "which you're already doing. Continue cooperating with authorities, pay whatever taxes are owed, settle legitimate creditor claims. What's left after that, if anything, is yours." He paused. "But be warned, this will take months, maybe years, and not everyone is patient." They left the federal building at 4, exhausted. The police escort drove them to a hotel Mavis had booked. Secure floor, corner suite, guards at the elevators. It felt like witness protection. Harlan stood at the window, looking out over Las Vegas. The city glittered in late afternoon sun, all promise and illusion. Somewhere out there Reeves and Sullivan were plotting. Creditors were filing motions. The government was calculating taxes. and an entire fortune sat in a vault beneath the desert, waiting to see who would claim it. Delphine came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Opening that vault?" Harlan thought about the question, thought about the life they'd had before. Small, quiet, slipping away in a Winnebago with $73 and fading dreams, and the life they had now. Dangerous, complicated, but alive. So terribly alive. "No," he said finally, "even if we lose it all, even if we end up with nothing, at least we tried. At least we took the chance. At least we mattered." Delphine leaned her head on his shoulder. "We always mattered," she said softly. "I know," Harlan said, "but now the world knows it too." Below, the city blazed into evening, and somewhere in the desert a hidden vault waited for its fate to be decided. The battle for $720 million had only just begun. The first week after going public felt like living inside a tornado. The hotel suite became a war room. Lawyers arrived at 7 each morning, left after midnight. Paperwork stacked higher than Harlan could reach. Phone calls, depositions, interviews, more phone calls. Mavis orchestrated everything with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony, except this symphony was played in courtrooms and conference rooms. By day 3, 14 separate parties had filed claims against the vault's contents. The state of Nevada, the Internal Revenue Service. 6 different creditor groups claiming Thaddeus owed them money. 2 alleged business partners from the 80s. A woman claiming to be Thaddeus's estranged daughter. A law firm representing the original contractors who'd built the sublevel. Even a casino that claimed Thaddeus had outstanding markers from 1989. "Everyone wants a piece," Mavis said, reviewing the latest filing. "Judge wants consolidated hearings, everything decided at once rather than 50 separate trials." "When?" Delphine asked. She'd aged a decade in 3 days, dark circles under her eyes, her hands never quite steady. 2 weeks. Federal courthouse. Judge Melanie Sharp presiding. She's tough but fair. Retired from the bench once, came back because she missed the interesting cases. Mavis set down the papers. "This will be interesting." Harlan barely listened. He sat at the window, watching Vegas pulse and breathe below. Every night his dreams took him back to the vault, walking those steel corridors, touching vacuum-sealed cash, reading Thaddeus's desperate letters. Sometimes in the dreams, Thaddeus was there, a ghost with hollow eyes asking, "What will you do with it? Will you be different than me?" He didn't have an answer yet. The media coverage grew more intense. Every major network wanted interviews. Publishers offered book deals. A streaming service pitched a documentary. Harlan and Delphine became overnight celebrities, their faces recognizable at gas stations and grocery stores. Some people congratulated them, others cursed them, said they didn't deserve wealth they hadn't earned. The comments sections were brutal, entitled "Boomers stealing from taxpayers," "Lucky bastards who stumbled into a fortune," "Thieves hiding behind technicalities." "Don't read those," Raymond advised. "People hate what they can't understand." But Harlan couldn't help himself. He understood their anger. Sometimes he felt it too. They'd worked their whole lives, saved, sacrificed, lost everything to a scam, and suddenly a hidden vault made them potentially wealthy beyond imagination. It felt random, unearned. Like winning a lottery they hadn't bought a ticket for. On day 7, something shifted. A reporter from the New York Times published a deep investigation into Thaddeus Crane's life. They'd interviewed people who'd known him, employees from his company, former friends. The picture that emerged was heartbreaking. A brilliant man who'd invented chipset designs that powered early computers, who'd made legitimate billions through innovation, but who'd become paranoid during a hostile takeover attempt in '87. He'd liquidated everything, converted it to cash and gold and bonds, and disappeared. The takeover group, led by an investment firm called Sterling and Associates, had spent decades trying to find his assets. They'd hired investigators, bribed officials, monitored accounts, and they'd found nothing. Because Thaddeus had gone underground, literally, built his vault and vanished from the world. "Wait," Harlan said, reading the article. "Sterling and Associates, isn't that—" "Reeves," Mavis finished. "The man who threatened you. He works for Sterling, has for 20 years. His entire career has been hunting Thaddeus's money." "So this isn't about legitimate debts," Delphine said. "This is about a corporation that wanted to steal Thaddeus's company and is still trying to steal his money." "Not quite that simple," Mavis cautioned. "Sterling did have some legitimate claims. Thaddeus breached contracts when he liquidated, cost people jobs, money. But yeah, a lot of this is about a grudge that's older than my career." The revelation changed public perception. Suddenly, Harlan and Delphine weren't lucky thieves. They were ordinary people caught between a dead man's paranoia and corporate vultures. Sympathy swung their direction. Donations poured into a legal defense fund set up by supporters. Letters arrived daily from people sharing their own stories of financial loss, of systems that failed them, of hope deferred. One letter hit Harlan especially hard, from a woman in Ohio. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Tesla, I lost my house in 2008. Foreclosure, bank error, spent 6 years fighting, lost everything. When I saw your story, I cried. Not because you found money, but because you found proof that sometimes ordinary people win. Please don't let them take this from you. Please show us that courage still matters." He showed the letter to Delphine. She read it twice, eyes glistening. "We can't let her down," she whispered. "We can't let any of them down." Day 9 brought unexpected help. A team of lawyers from a prominent firm in San Francisco reached out. They specialized in treasure trove law, inheritance disputes, tax optimization. Their leader, a woman named Patricia, who wore power suits and spoke in paragraphs, laid out a strategy. "Here's reality," Patricia said, spreading charts across the conference table. "You're not keeping $700 million. No one does. Between taxes, legitimate creditor claims, and legal fees, expect to lose 70% minimum. The question is whether you lose it to the government and courts, or whether you have agency in where it goes." "Agency how?" Mavis asked. "Proactive settlement," Patricia explained. "You voluntarily satisfy legitimate debts. You pay taxes before they're demanded. You donate significant portions to charity. You create a foundation. Basically, you spend down the money in ways that benefit everyone while securing your claim to what remains." She pulled up a spreadsheet. "My recommendation: offer state and federal governments 45% total for taxes. Offer verified creditors another 15% to settle all claims. Allocate another 10% to charitable purposes. Keep 30% for yourselves." Harlan did the math. 30% of 720 million, roughly 216 million. Still an impossible fortune. Still more than they'd ever dreamed, but distributed in a way that felt less like theft and more like justice. "Will they accept that?" he asked. "If we structure it right, frame it as a good faith settlement, and get ahead of the legal battles, yes," Patricia said. "Judges love it when parties resolve things without clogging courts, and politically it's hard to argue with someone voluntarily giving away $500 million. Delphine looked at Harlan. Had that conversation that happened in silence after 54 years of marriage. Weighing risk against reward, greed against conscience, legacy against survival. "Do it," Harlan said, "but I want control over the charitable allocation. I want to decide where that 10% goes." "What did you have in mind?" Patricia asked. Harlan pulled out the letter from the woman in Ohio. People like her. People who got scammed, foreclosed, buried by systems that were supposed to protect them. We set up something that helps them. Legal aid, financial counseling, emergency funds, something that actually matters. Patricia smiled. "I think we can work with that." The consolidated hearing began on a gray Monday morning. Federal courthouse in downtown Las Vegas. Media trucks lined the street. Protesters held signs, half supporting the Teslas, half demanding the money go to government programs. Security was intense. Metal detectors, armed marshals, bag searches. Inside courtroom 6, the space was packed. Harlan and Delphine sat at the plaintiff's table with Mavis and Patricia. Behind them, Raymond and Teresa. Across the aisle, a dozen lawyers representing various claimants. Reeves and Sullivan sat in the gallery, stone-faced. Judge Melanie Sharp entered at 9 sharp. Mid-60s, grey hair pulled back severely, reading glasses on a chain, black robe crisp. She surveyed the room with eyes that had seen every trick and tolerated none of them. "This is Crane Estate asset recovery," she said. "I've reviewed all filings. This should have been 14 separate cases, but I'm consolidating because life's too short." She looked at Harlan and Delphine. "Mr. and Mrs. Tesla, you're the finders of these assets." "Yes, Your Honor." Harlan stood, his voice steadier than he felt. "And you're claiming ownership based on a will left by Thaddeus Crane?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Opposition claims the will is invalid due to mental incompetence, that the assets belong to creditors, and that you're essentially treasure hunters trying to circumvent legitimate claims." Sharp looked at the opposing counsel. "That about sum it up?" A lawyer in an expensive suit stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Sterling and Associates represents investors who—" "I read your brief, Counselor. It was 86 pages when it could have been 10. Sit down." Sharp turned to Patricia. "Defense counsel, you filed a settlement proposal. Walk me through it." Patricia stood, commanding the room. "Your Honor, the Teslas acknowledge this situation is complex. They propose a voluntary settlement, 45% to state and federal taxes, 15% to verified creditors with documented claims, 10% to a charitable foundation helping financial fraud victims, and 30% retained by the Teslas for their discovery and, as per Mr. Crane's testamentary intent." Murmurs filled the courtroom. Sharp banged her gavel once. "Interesting. Government, what's your position?" The IRS attorney stood. "Acceptable, Your Honor. Percentage exceeds our initial projection for tax liability." The Nevada tax attorney agreed. "State concurs." "Creditors?" Sharp asked. The Sterling lawyer hesitated. "Your Honor, our clients are owed significantly more than 15% represents. We object." "On what grounds?" Sharp leaned forward. "Be specific." "Thaddeus Crane breached contracts in '87 when he liquidated Crane Industries. Our clients lost—" "38 years ago," Sharp interrupted. "And you've been paid zero in all that time because you couldn't find assets to recover from. Now someone else finds them and offers you 15% of $700 million, which, if my math is right, is over $100 million. And you're objecting? It's not sufficient to cover— "Nothing would be sufficient to cover 38 years of interest and damages you're claiming," Sharp said. "At a certain point, this stops being about justice and starts being about greed." She flipped through papers. "I'm looking at documents showing Sterling and Associates spent an estimated $23 million over 3 decades hunting these assets. You found nothing. The Teslas, with a $100 deposit and curiosity, found everything. That should tell you something." "Your Honor." "I'm not finished." Sharp's voice could cut glass. "I'm also looking at evidence that Sterling engaged in intimidation tactics, threatening the Teslas, suggesting harm might come to them if they didn't relinquish claims. That doesn't help your case." In the gallery, Reeves shifted uncomfortably. "Here's my preliminary ruling," Sharp said. "The will stands. Thaddeus Crane was eccentric but not incompetent. His intent was clear. Leave assets to whoever found them. The Teslas found them, documented everything, and acted in good faith. Their proposed settlement is more than generous, and I'm inclined to approve it. But first, I want to hear from them directly." She looked at Harlan and Delphine. "Why should you keep any of this? Convince me." The courtroom fell silent. Every eye turned to the elderly couple at the plaintiff's table. Harlan stood slowly, Delphine beside him. For a moment he just breathed, gathering courage. Then he spoke. "Your Honor, we're not treasure hunters. We're not schemers. 3 years ago, we lost our life savings to a financial scam. $47,000. Every penny we'd saved in 40 years of marriage. We lost our house. We've been living in a Winnebago at a desert RV park, surviving on Social Security." His voice cracked. "We saw an auction notice for a palace, paid $100 we couldn't afford just to walk through it, just to pretend for one afternoon that our lives hadn't shrunk down to nothing." Delphine continued, her voice soft but clear. "We found a vault built by a man who'd made every wrong choice about money, who'd died alone, surrounded by wealth that meant nothing. He left a letter asking whoever found it to do better than he did, to use it in ways that mattered." "And will you?" Sharp asked. "Or is this just a pitch to keep money you stumbled into?" "We're setting up a foundation," Harlan said. "The Tesla Compassion Fund, helping people who've been victimized by financial fraud. People like us. Legal assistance, emergency funds, financial counseling. The 10% allocation, that's $70 million. That'll help thousands of people rebuild their lives." "And the $216 million you keep?" Sharp pressed. "What about that?" Harlan looked at his daughter, at Mavis, who'd dropped everything to help them, at Raymond, who'd risked himself, at Teresa, who'd documented truth in darkness. "We'll pay off our debts, help our family, secure our future. But we're also buying the palace, renovating it, turning it into a community center and museum. Part of it will house the foundation offices, part will be a financial literacy center, and part will be a memorial to Thaddeus Crane and a warning about what happens when wealth becomes the only thing that matters." "We don't need 200 million to be happy," Delphine added. "We never needed millions at all. We just needed enough to stop being scared, to stop feeling invisible, to matter again." She paused. "Thaddeus spent 32 years underground, alone, counting gold he never spent. We're not going to make that mistake. We're going to live, and help others live too." Sharp sat back, studying them. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, she spoke. "I've been on the bench for 33 years. I've seen every kind of greed and desperation humans are capable of, but I've also seen occasional grace." She looked at the sterling lawyer. "Your clients can accept 15% or get nothing. Choose." The lawyer consulted with colleagues, with Reeves in the gallery. Whispered arguments. Finally, "We'll accept, Your Honor." "Wise choice," Sharp said. "All other claimants without documented proof of valid debt, your claims are dismissed. Mr. and Mrs. Tesla, your settlement is approved. 45% to taxes, 15% to creditors, 10% to charity, 30% retained. I'm also issuing a protective order. No party may harass, threaten, or intimidate the Teslas. Violations will result in contempt charges." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed to exit, filing stories. Lawyers shook hands or glared. Harlan sank into his chair, Delphine collapsing beside him. They'd won. Actually won. Mavis hugged them both, tears streaming. "You did it! You actually did it!" "We all did," Harlan said, looking at the team around them. Patricia, Raymond, Teresa, Mavis, strangers who'd become family through shared purpose. Outside, media swarmed. Harlan made a brief statement, voice shaking. "We're grateful for Judge Sharp's wisdom. We'll honor the settlement terms and work to make sure this money helps people who need it. Thank you." They climbed into a waiting car, police escort clearing the way. As they drove through Vegas toward the hotel, Delphine started laughing. Not hysterical, just relieved, pure and bright. "We just won $200 million. "We did," Harlan said, and started laughing too. "What do we do now?" Mavis asked. Harlan looked out at the city, at all those lives intersecting, struggling, hoping. Now we get to work. The next 6 months were a blur of activity. The money was transferred into escrow, taxes paid immediately, 108 million to state and federal governments, creditor settlements processed, another 108 million distributed among verified claims. Sterling and Associates received their portion, 73 million, and quietly withdrew from public view. Reeves and Sullivan disappeared, their hunt finally over. The Tesla Compassion Fund was established with 70 million. Patricia helped structure it as a non-profit with a board of directors. Harlan and Delphine insisted on including people who'd experienced financial fraud, not just lawyers and accountants. The woman from Ohio who'd written them, she became a board member. A veteran who'd lost his benefits to identity theft. A teacher whose pension had been embezzled. People who understood the mission viscerally. The fund's first year helped 382 families. Legal representation for wrongful foreclosures, emergency grants for medical debt, financial counseling to rebuild credit, small acts that meant everything to recipients. Letters poured in, testimonials, thanks, tears on paper. Harlan read everyone. The Palace project took longer. Purchasing the property from the foreclosure auction cost them $82,000. Renovations cost another $12 million. They hired local contractors, insisted on fair wages, turned construction into community employment. The underground vault was sealed permanently, its contents removed and secured. The space was converted into archives, preserving Thaddeus's story as a cautionary tale. The main palace became the Crane Heritage Center, meeting rooms for community groups, classrooms for financial literacy courses, a museum documenting Thaddeus's life and the vault discovery, offices for the Compassion Fund, and in the center, a memorial. Photographs of Thaddeus through the years, his journals in glass cases, and a plaque with the final line from his letter. May whoever finds this use it better than I did. They moved out of the Winnebago, bought a modest home in Henderson, 3 bedrooms, small yard, nothing extravagant. Delphine planted a garden. Harlan set up a workshop, went back to restoring old radios. Not for money, just for the joy of fixing broken things. They discovered that wealth's greatest gift wasn't luxury. It was choice. Choosing how to spend time. Choosing what mattered. Mavis quit her practice, became director of the Compassion Fund. Her salary was modest but sufficient. More importantly, her work had meaning. She helped draft legislation to protect vulnerable people from financial predators, testified before Congress, became a voice for the voiceless. Their grandchildren visited regularly now. The distance that had grown during poverty years closed with renewed connection. Not because of money, though that helped. Because Harlan and Delphine were present again, not consumed by survival, actually alive. 1 year after the vault discovery, they held a ceremony at the Crane Heritage Center. Over 500 people attended. Fraud victims helped by the fund, community members who'd found support, media who'd followed the story. Judge Sharp came, offered brief remarks about justice and grace. Even Agent Morrison from the FBI attended, acknowledged that Harlan and Delphine had handled an impossible situation with remarkable integrity. Harlan stood at a podium in the palace's grand ballroom, the same room that had been draped in dust and silence a year ago. Now it gleamed with restoration and purpose. Delphine beside him, he addressed the crowd. When we found $700 million, people asked if we were lucky or blessed, or just in the right place at the right time. And maybe we were all those things. But the real question isn't why we found it. It's what we chose to do after. He paused, looking at faces in the crowd. We could have taken that money and disappeared, bought mansions and yachts and private jets, lived like Thaddeus, isolated by wealth. But we'd already learned that lesson. We'd already lost everything once and discovered that stuff doesn't matter. Connection matters. Purpose matters. Meaning matters. Delphine spoke next. For 32 years, Thaddeus Crane sat in a vault counting gold. He thought he was preserving wealth. Really, he was imprisoning himself. When we found his money, we also found his warning. Don't make my mistakes. Don't let wealth steal your life. She smiled, tears glistening. So we decided to give it away. Not all of it. We kept enough to secure our future and help our family, but most of it went back into the world, into helping people, into building something that outlasts us. The applause started slowly, then built. People stood. In the back, Harlan saw Raymond, arms crossed, nodding approval. Teresa wiped her eyes. Even Patricia, who'd seen everything, looked moved. The Tesla Compassion Fund has helped almost 400 families this year, Harlan continued. Next year we hope to help 1,000. In 5 years, 10,000. This isn't about us anymore. It's about proving that sometimes ordinary people do extraordinary things. Not because they're special, but because they choose to be. More applause. Harlan stepped back, overwhelmed. Delphine squeezed his hand. They'd done it, turned blood money into something clean, turned a vault into a beacon, turned their last chapter into their most meaningful. Afterward, people approached to share stories. A single mother who'd been drowning in predatory loans, now debt-free thanks to fund assistance. An elderly man who'd lost his retirement to fraud, now working as a fund counselor helping others. A teenager whose college money had been stolen, now attending university on a Tesla scholarship. One woman, maybe 40, took Delphine's hands. "You don't know me," she said, "but 2 years ago, I was you. I lost everything. I was living in my car, contemplating ending it. Then I saw your story on the news, saw you fight, saw you win, saw you choose to help others instead of just helping yourselves." Tears streamed down her face. "You gave me hope when I had none. The fund helped me get back on my feet. Now I have an apartment, a job, a future, because you showed me that it's never too late, that ordinary people still matter." Delphine pulled her into a hug, both women crying. Harlan turned away, throat too tight to speak. This is what the money meant. Not the numbers in accounts, but the lives it touched, the hope it restored, the futures it secured. As evenings settled over the Crane Heritage Center, as guests departed and lights dimmed, Harlan and Delphine walked through the restored palace alone. Their footsteps echoed on marble floors. They passed the ballroom where Thaddeus had once entertained elite guests, the library where he'd descended into paranoia, the kitchen door that led to the basement and the vault below. "Do you ever wonder what he'd think?" Delphine asked. "Thaddeus, if he could see what we did." Harlan considered. "I think he'd be relieved, maybe even proud. He spent his whole life building walls between himself and the world. We tore them down." They climbed to the second floor, entered the study where Harlan had first found Thaddeus's journals. The room was now part of the museum, preserved exactly as it had been. The desk, the filing cabinets, the journal still open to that final entry. Delphine read it aloud. "Let them take the company. Let them take the patents. What they can never find is worth more than all of it combined." She looked up. "He was wrong, you know. It wasn't worth more. It was worth nothing until someone used it for something beyond hoarding." "He figured that out eventually," Harlan said. "That's why he left the letter, why he unlocked the vault. He couldn't fix his mistakes, but he gave someone else the chance to." They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd lived long enough to understand that wealth was a test most people failed. Thaddeus had failed it. They'd been given an unexpected chance to pass it, and they had, not perfectly, but honestly. "We should go home," Delphine finally said. "Check on the garden." "Yeah," Harlan smiled. "I've got a radio waiting in the workshop. 1963 Zenith, beautiful piece, should have it working by next week." They walked out together, through the palace that was no longer a tomb but a sanctuary, locked the doors behind them, climbed into their sensible Honda, nothing fancy, just reliable. drove through Las Vegas toward Henderson, toward the small house with the garden and the workshop and the life they'd chosen. They passed casinos promising fortunes, past mansions behind gates, past all the symbols of wealth that people chased their whole lives. And Harlan felt nothing but contentment, because he'd learned what Thaddeus never did, that money could buy comfort and security and help, but it couldn't buy the feeling of Delphine's hand in his, couldn't buy the smile on Mavis's face when she talked about the fund's work, couldn't buy the letters from strangers saying thank you for showing us that hope still exists. 3 years later, the Tesla Compassion Fund had helped over 15,000 families. The Crane Heritage Center hosted over 200,000 visitors. The story had been told and retold, inspiring others to think differently about wealth and legacy. Books were written, documentaries filmed, case studies taught in business schools. But for Harlan and Delphine, life remained purposefully small. They woke with the sun, tended the garden, worked at the center a few days a week, mostly greeting visitors and sharing their story. Spent time with grandchildren who called them regularly now, read books, took walks, fixed broken things. The money sat in accounts carefully managed, generating interest that flowed to the foundation. More than they could ever spend, less than they'd started with, exactly what they needed. Enough. On a warm spring morning, 7 years after finding the vault, Delphine made coffee while Harlan fixed toast. A routine so ordinary it felt sacred. The radio played softly, a restored Philco from '61 that Harlan had brought back to life. The morning news came on. In financial news, the Tesla Compassion Fund announced it has now assisted over 50,000 families affected by financial fraud, making it one of the most impactful charitable organizations founded in the last decade. Founders Harlan and Delphine Tesla, who discovered a hidden fortune in 2025, were unavailable for comment but released a statement saying, quote, "This was never about us. It was always about proving that ordinary people can choose to do extraordinary good." Harlan smiled, turned off the radio. They'd stopped doing interviews years ago, let the work speak for itself. He carried coffee to the back patio where Delphine sat watching birds at the feeder. They sat together in morning sun, two people in their 80s who'd stumbled into wealth and chosen purpose over comfort. "No regrets?" Delphine asked, a question she'd asked before, a ritual between them. "None," Harlan said, meaning it. "You?" "Just one," she said softly. "I wish we'd been brave enough to try this years ago, to take chances, to believe we mattered." "We didn't have a vault to find years ago." "No," Delphine agreed. "But we had each other. We always had that. We just forgot it was enough." Harlan took her hand, age spots and arthritis and 57 years of love condensed into that simple touch. "It was always enough," he said. "The vault just reminded us." They sat in silence, watching the day begin. Somewhere, the Crane Heritage Center was opening its doors. Somewhere, a family was getting help from the fund. Somewhere, a person was reading their story and thinking maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to matter. Anyone can change the world if they're brave enough to find it and wise enough to give it away. As the morning sun climbed higher over their small garden in Henderson, Harlan and Delphine didn't reach for their phones or their schedules. They simply sat together, two ordinary people who'd been given an extraordinary chance and hadn't squandered it on luxury or isolation. The palace that had once been Thaddeus Crane's tomb was now a place where broken dreams were rebuilt, where people learned that wealth without purpose was just another form of poverty, and where one man's final wish for redemption had become thousands of people's second chance. The mechanic and the librarian who'd lost everything had found more than $700 million beneath the desert floor. They'd found proof that it's never too late to choose meaning over money, connection over comfort, and legacy over luxury. Because for Harlan and Delphine Tesla, and for everyone they'd helped along the way, The real treasure was never in the vault. It was in the courage to open it, the wisdom to share it, and the grace to remember that in the end, we're not measured by what we keep, but by what we give away. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories are waiting for you. Click to keep discovering. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe the truth deserves a voice.